What's up, NBA fans? What's up, all sports fans? NBA fans, all sports fans, NBA fans, all sports fans. This is the Behind the Bench crew, your co host right here, JB. And I just wanted to chime in for a few to talk about the NBA season, the 2021 2022 campaign, which is well underway as we're close to the halfway point in the season where we're about 35, 36 games in, and this has been a very competitive season. If anyone takes a look at the conferences, the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, we see just how competitive these teams have been going against each other. Where for years, the Western Conference has had such a glaring advantage in terms of overall talent. But now the Eastern Conference, in a lot of ways, is more competitive than the Western Conference when you compare the top 8 teams in the East versus the top 8 teams in the West, which is a great thing. And when you look at the standings and when you look at the teams that are sitting atop the conference, particularly the Western Conference, it's pointing to the fact that, and this is something that basketball fans who love competition have waited with bated breath to see once again, something that has been supplanted and set aside throughout the course of this past decade of the 2010s. But if we look at the standings now, we are about to get the real NBA back. We're about to get real competition back. And it points to the simple fact that over the past 12 seasons, we have had to sit and watch what I simply call the Superteam Era of basketball. And I believe that Superteam Era has now run its course. If you look at the standings, as I mentioned moments ago, the teams that are sitting atop the conference are teams that for the past 4 seasons, they have been building their roster primarily with young players who they have drafted. And then once they, reach that ascension stage where they mature and emerge as stars and superstars, those teams have complemented those top players with veteran, latent players. And they are benefiting, from those efforts of staying the course, being patient, understanding that it's going to take time to develop young talent. And most of the young players that have been entering the NBA, particularly over the past decade or so, they've pretty much been relying on one and done talent. Back in the mid 90s up until the beginning of the 2000s, we saw this influx of prep players, high school players. But to try to offset that, the league came to a compromise to where they agreed to bring in one and done players, players who have completed at least 1 year of collegiate level basketball. So when you're drafting 18, 19-year-olds and when you're drafting international players of the same age, they're not going to come right in and dominate. And I can give multiple examples of that. When you look at the reigning NBA champion, Giannis Antetokounmpo, here's a young man who was drafted number 15 pick the year he entered the league. And he's an international born player from the country of Greece. And he did not come in the league dominating. He averaged, single digits his rookie year. And he had the passion to become great, but, it's going to take time. And Giannis stayed the course, and his team believed in him. Coaches believed in him. Fans believed in him. The city of Milwaukee believed in him. And because of that support, he said that he's going to stay the course and he's going to commit to Milwaukee long term and sign, an extension. And when all the pressure in the world was placed on him to leave Milwaukee by, you know, uh, talking heads that covers the NBA and or trying to dictate moves by these, you know, superstars, trying to gear them to go to big market teams. You know, he declined that notion. He bucked the trend, no pun intended, and he said, you know, because my team believed in me, my coach, the fans in the city of Milwaukee believed in me. I want to bring a title here to Milwaukee, and he received a lot of pushback for that. And when he was told that he would never win a title in Milwaukee, the very year that he said he was going to re-sign long-term in Milwaukee, he wins the NBA World Championship. And I believe it's one of the greatest moments in the history of the league. And on that day that he raised that trophy months ago, he became a luminary of the sport and he preserved the art of competition. And that should be his greatest contribution to the NBA, when he retires. But he has a long way to go. He hasn't even reached his prime yet, and he's getting better and better. And now that he's tasted that championship experience, he's going to be that much more difficult to beat this year as Milwaukee Bucks are the reigning champion. And he brought a title to Milwaukee for the first time in 50 years, since 1971, when the great Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, delivered the city's first championship. But I believe the example that Giannis set forth is going to influence stars who are just coming up in the league. They're going to be more inclined to try to do the same thing. And I believe we're seeing that because this past offseason, or even the previous season, these young stars, such as Donovan Mitchell's, the Jason Tatums of the world, Brandon Ingram's, DeAndre Fox's, Luka Doncic, all these young stars that are coming up and rising up the ranks, they have signed long-term extensions with their current teams, either the teams who drafted them. And I believe it's a great thing, and I believe it's going to promote and encourage competition throughout the league. And I believe it's going to provide more excitement by fans, and a lot of fans who were turned off by this super team and this stacking the deck, they're going to return back and support the NBA again. And I believe the stage is set if the league would just really peep game that this decade of the 2020s can bring forth another glory era of the NBA, just as it happened back in the 80s and 90s. So I believe Giannis set the tone, and the league is ready. The league is ready for it. It's primed for it. It's time for it. It's long overdue. And if you look at the standings right now, as I've been saying time and time again, the top teams, particularly in the Western Conference, are not only young teams that have now reached maturity, but they're small market teams. So the notion that small market teams cannot win, that's been a misnomer and a myth the entire time. You can win anywhere. You can win anywhere. I never believed that. And we saw proof of that this past season, where two small market teams advanced to the NBA Finals to compete for the World Championship of basketball. The Milwaukee Bucks and the Phoenix Suns. And I believe the Superteam Era has run its course. To build a super team, you have to relinquish too much of what it takes, what it requires to build a long-standing, successful team. And the teams that have followed that mold, as they're going to find out, the super team model is only going to roll for about 3 years before it all, deteriorates by that fourth year. Because what you traded away or mortgaged off to generate that super team, where you may have that initial jump on the competition in that first year, by the time you reach year 4, there's nothing left. You have no talent pool. The talent pool is gone. You've traded away all your draft picks. So you cannot really facilitate any type of trades, and you can't draft anybody because you gave the draft picks up. Or to build a super team, you removed your real roster by getting 2/3 of the players who you had on the roster prior to stack the deck to bring on all these superstars. The formula doesn't work and is not feasible for long-term success. It's about as manufactured as you can get in terms of sports. So now, what started off 3 years ago, when you see teams like Phoenix and Utah and Denver and Memphis and Golden State, who is returned back to the top after 2 years of trying to rebuild after Kevin Durant, left Golden State and signed with the Brooklyn Nets. But the key to it all, even when Kevin Durant was playing with the Golden State Warriors, they never relinquished or traded away their draft picks. And basketball fans down the road, they're going to understand how important draft picks are, because historically, prior to the Superteam era, previous title teams, they still had a draft pick to keep the team going, moving forward. Even if it's a low first round pick, you still got a first round pick. And we've seen plenty of second round picks thrive in the league today. Nikola Jokic, he started off, he wasn't highly touted, but you fast forward 6 years later, 7 years later, 6 years later, not only has he become the best center in basketball, but he's now the reigning league MVP. Draymond Green was drafted in the second round, and he's been one of the foundational players to help propel Golden State to championship level over the course of the past 8 years or so. So draft picks are important. So now you see a situation where you got Golden State back on top because the young players that they drafted over the past 2-3 years, they coached them up, they developed them, they let them play consistently versus other NBA teams, so they can adapt to the game. So now you fast forward 2 years. Now they have emerged. And the great thing about Golden State is their veteran players, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, they mentor those young players that they have on their team. Now they feel that they belong. Now they playing outstanding basketball, and that's why they got the best record in the league right now, sitting atop the Western Conference. Phoenix Suns did the same thing, starting off with Devin Booker 6 years ago, drafted him out of high school, 18 years old. Then a couple years down the line, they drafted DeAndre Ayton and then Mikal Bridges. And then once they set the foundation, then they brought in the veteran pieces. Like, they brought in although he was young, but he been playing basketball a long time. Cameron Payne, Cameron Johnson, Jay Crowder, Dario Saric. And then they brought in one of the greatest point guards of all time, Chris Paul, to anchor the team, to lead the team. And they was already moving up the ranks even before they brought those veteran players to the team, because during the bubble, the NBA bubble, during the seeding round, the only team that finished undefeated in the seeding round were the Phoenix Suns. So they was already ascending. They was already getting better with their young players. Utah Jazz, same thing. Started out Rudy Gobert. Then they brought in Donovan Mitchell. I believe he played 2 years at University of Louisville. And then Joe Ingles, Royce O'Neal. Then once they set the foundation, then they start bringing in, high-level players. Bojan Bogdanovic as a free agent. Then they traded for veteran point guard Mike Conley. Then they made a key move in trading for Jordan Clarkson. Next thing you know, a year later, they finished with the best record in the league and clinched the number 1 seed throughout the playoff. And now they've gotten deeper by adding additional players, veteran players. They brought in Hassan Whiteside, Rudy Gay, and then they got Eric Pashaw from the Golden State Warriors. So now they go 10, 11 deep. So that's why those three teams are sitting atop the Western Conference right now. Then you got the Memphis Grizzlies started over, kind of like after the, Zach Randolph, Tony Allen, Marc Gasol era. And they started over with young players led by John Morant, Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson Jr. What's his name? Derek Bain, another rookie. And now look at them. They went to they was one game away from going to the playoffs last year, but now they're the fourth seed in the Western Conference. And they was able to win games while John Morant was out of the lineup. So now they the fourth seed in the West. Then the Denver Nuggets been building their team up over the past 5 years. Again, started with Nikola Jokic, then bringing in a Jamal Murray from the University of Kentucky. Then they drafted Michael Porter Jr. Then they had Gary Harris. And then they kind of started bringing in some veterans, Will Barton and Paul Millsap. And they were a veteran playoff laden team. They went to the conference finals during the bubble season, and if it not had been for injury after they made a big time trade last season by bringing in Aaron Gordon, and they won like 9 to 10 straight games with Gordon in the lineup before they lost for the first time with him on the team, and then unfortunately Jamal Murray suffered that injury during the tail end of the season. So you got a situation where if Denver had been healthy, it's possible that they could have went to the finals. So that's 5 teams right there that I just mentioned that are small market teams that have built their team up to the point where they can compete for the next 5 to 6 years. So when you look at it, these teams ain't going nowhere. And the teams that have stacked the deck, relinquish and mortgage away their real talent and draft picks, talent pool all dried up. Ain't nothing there but air. You know what I mean? Those teams gonna fall to the back of the pack. They already in the back of the pack as we speak. So I believe the super team era is over. I believe it's been a disruption, and a lot of people out there, the talking heads, will try to convince the young generation of basketball fans that teams were always built their way throughout the course of NBA history. But if they, pull back the pages and do research for themselves, they'll find that most of those memorable teams of the past, a lot of those teams, they became dynastic level teams, and they started from scratch. They started from the bottom. Boston Celtics of the 60s, the New York Knicks of the early 70s, Showtime Lakers, they was building their foundation like from 3-4 years prior. The 80s Celtics with Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish. Detroit Pistons started from the bottom. Chicago Bulls started with Isaiah Thomas. Chicago Bulls started from the bottom with Michael Jordan. The Houston Rockets won back-to-back titles in 1994, 95, but they had been in the battles for 8-9 years before they won, with Akeem Olajuwon leading the way. Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, they went through the wars, they went through the battles, for 3 years before they broke through and won their first championship, went on to win 3 straight. I can give countless examples. Those teams had to go through the fire. They had to battle. They had to compete. But the super team era, it created a situation where it devalues competition and it devalues the ability of actual players who found themselves, caught up in that mix. But I believe it's a great thing for the NBA. And I believe the super team era has run its course, and the NBA is about to return back to what it's supposed to be. And it's millions of basketball fans that cannot wait, and they got their clock set. But I believe this will be the last year, because most of the superstars who have played on the super team over the past 2 years, or stacked teams. Uh, they're getting older now. They're on the other side of 30, and they're close to the end, and they are closer to their prime. So, but I'll be delving deeper into the super team era in future videos, and teams that should have stayed the course and continue to build with the youth roster that they had, and the young talent that they had, and just kudos to those teams that built their team the way it's supposed to be built. And now they sitting there, they're in a great position where every year for the next 5 years, they're going to be prime contenders for the championship. So we're talking about Golden State, Phoenix Suns, Utah Jazz, Denver Nuggets, Memphis Grizzlies, New Orleans Pelicans when they get fully healthy, and that's just in the Western Conference. Then in the East, Milwaukee Bucks, who are the reigning champions. The Chicago Bulls are back. They playing great basketball this year. Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan leading the way, and they brought in great young talent such as Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, and they drafted young talent of their own. Kobe White and I believe his name Patrick Williams. So they got depth. They made a great trade in getting Nikola Vucevic from the Orlando Magic. So they're set. They're set. And matter of fact, they're tied for first place in the Eastern Conference as we speak. You see what I'm saying? Atlanta Hawks, they got a good future ahead of them. The New York Knicks are back after reaching the playoffs for the first time in like 7-8 years. I can go on and on and on. So this season, when you look at all the teams that are out there competing and playing great basketball, Miami Heat is playing good basketball this year. They got a combination of good young players built around Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. They brought us some key veterans to help anchor the unit. So you got a situation where you can honestly say there are 10 teams, 10 to 11 teams that can seriously compete for the championship this year. You couldn't say that during the super team era. It got to the point where it was really only 2 teams that can compete. But like I said, I just want to touch down on that for a few, chime in. But like I said, in future videos, we're gonna talk more about this super team and the impact that the super team era had on the NBA over the past 10, 12 years, and teams that should have stayed the course and stuck with a young talent. So I just want to drop that real quick. And again, this has been JB for the Behind the Bench crew, and stay tuned for future videos and future episodes. But I'll holler later.